I brought in the guitarist as a way to create buzz around the store. I didn't expect to make money at it in the store. I just wanted to get my name out, and that worked. I got a lot of buzz from that, and actually some international recognition. But then, when I closed the store, I continued doing the concerts, somewhat as a hobby. But I had always hoped I would make money, but I did it for 13 years, and really never made any money. It was something I just loved to do. It was just, it was a, it was just out of love. But I kept thinking maybe I'll figure out how to make money, and I kept trying different things, and I finally learned that the way to make money in the concert business is to sell liquor. That's you make your money off concessions, and you can never really make money off of ticket sales, because the way it breaks out is half of it or more will go to the artist, and then you're going to pay a big portion to the venue to rent it. And if you have to have staff and to rent equipment, it just doesn't work out. And if you can sell liquor, then, or coffee or pies or whatever you can sell, you can make money off of that. But in the venues that I was using, that was not a possibility, because in the Atlanta area, unless you sell food, you can't sell liquor. And I learned in what I was doing, now it doesn't apply to everybody, but what I learned was that the people I brought in were vertical markets. There were fingerstyle players, so their enthusiasts would come. There were bluegrass players like Beppe Gambetta, and he was a flat picker, and so those people would come to see him. About 80 people would be break even for me, and 120 I would make. I could put maybe $200 or $300 in my pocket. If I could get 300 people, I could pay the artist $2,000, and I could make 1,000. But getting that audience was very difficult. And Lawrence Juber and I had a talk about this. When he first started coming, I could get 150 people. Now that was back in the early 2000s. And the last time I had him here, I had maybe 80 people. And the thing that he and I discussed was that his fans are dying. They're Beatles fans. They're people.
Oh, sorry.
His audience is, they're getting old. They can't get out. They can't drive at night. There's all kinds of reasons for that. But the audience itself was going away, and so it's like, all of us, we enjoy playing music, but the real audience, the real money in concert business is in young people. That's the people who go out, they want to go out and party and stuff, So, making money at our age playing music is going to be a difficult thing unless you're, John Prine, who's been around for, 50 years, When I had the venue where I used the Unitarian Church, I was paying them $700 to rent the venue. And I would guarantee the artist $500. And I used to have, sometimes early on I would guarantee them more. But at some point I was dealing with agents, and these are, big name guys, and the agents were wanting more money because that's their job. And I just said, okay, I'll guarantee them $500, take it or leave it. That's all I'm going to offer you. If they don't come, I'll find somebody else. And I found that I could get pretty much anybody with a $500 guarantee. And the thing that I did was I made sure that I paid those people what I told them I would pay them. I never stiffed anybody. And so the agents would come to me and book my little concert in Atlanta, and then they would fan out around Atlanta and use me as their hub for their concert in the Southeast. Now, again, you got to keep in mind that the people I was working with were these are solo guitarists. So unless you're Tommy Emmanuel or a few other people, you're not going to command a huge audience. There's very few people that are going to do that. In fact, Tommy Emmanuel, he was the very first person that came to my store and as an artist, and he did a workshop before the power wasn't even on in the building because there was wires hanging out of the ceiling. But he did a little workshop. Then he did a concert locally, a very ill promoted concert, but only about 35 people showed up.
Oh my goodness me, that's amazing.
That was
when you think what he is now.
That was when
it's sort of implicit in what you're saying, but was the audience largely made up of guitar players?
Well, they were made up. That particular audience was made up of a group called the Georgia Thumb and Finger Pickers Association, and which was sort of a offshoot of the Chet Atkins Appreciation Society. And guys in that group he sponsored the concert, but he didn't know how to promote it. But that was really when Tommy was just getting his feet on the ground in the United States and touring, so he wasn't commanding, the money and the audiences. Today, he wants $10,000 to talk to you,
So is your problem then, or was your problem, Eddie, that you had only guitar players? And as I sort of looked, when I looked around the last concert that Lawrence Juba did, I saw guitar players and their wives.
Right, exactly. So we used to call them, welcome guitarist and your hostages,
Very good.
Bring their wives as, and usually the wives would enjoy it, but it was the guitar players who would bring their wives along, And there were some women, and I used to promote this as a safe place for a single woman to come and enjoy music. I kept, things, wholesome and everything, and made sure it was a safe place. And I had some people who would, they were repeat customers. There were single women who would come often just because it was a safe place, and the entertainment was very top quality.
You mentioned there a key word, I think, Eddie, entertainment, because I think the point we were talking about, you get those who want to come and see, the guitar players who want to come and see the person and their wives, their hostages. Right. I know Louis and I went to see John Jorgensen in Atlanta, and we were ecstatic, but both our wives were, hey, and they wouldn't have gone back to see him. And I think one of the things I've found in running clubs in the UK is if you can find the entertainers, they'll pull in, people will come back and see them, not just the specialist pickers or whatever, and you can build a much wider audience. And they might even bring their kids who get locked into the music, and they're the future of audiences.
Yeah.
Do you agree? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, as I moved through this process, I used to have, when I first started doing it in the store, I had a little room that would seat 50 people. And I was doing singer-songwriters as well as, that was how I started out, just local singer-songwriters. And then the word got out that I was doing this, so I would have people from out of town wanting to come in. And I started bringing in some Nashville songwriters. And I learned early on that just because you have a CD out doesn't mean you're an entertainer. And so as I started maturing in this, and even with bigger names, I would want to see videos of them live in concert, but I was really more interested in what happened between the songs than I was the songs themselves. Because the entertainment happens between the songs. from the point of view of what the wives and so forth are going to like. And the best example I have of this is another Tommy Emmanuel concert. The same guy promoted it. It was a year later, maybe. It was at a different venue. That time, 60 people showed up. Okay, double the audience. But they brought a guy out to open for him, and he was a tremendously good finger picker. This was the same Georgia Finger Pickers Association group. He was just great finger picker, but he was like a log finger picking. It was like, it was the most boring thing I've ever seen in my life, because he would play a song. Well, I'm going to do this song now, and he would do it, and then juxtaposition that against Tommy Emmanuel, who, when he comes on stage, bam, you're going to be entertained. Another example of the opposite of that is Adrian Legg. Now, Adrian is a fabulous finger picker, and when I first heard seeds of him back years ago, I really enjoyed the banter that he did. He was really funny and everything. And then I had him come, and he stayed here at the house for a couple of nights, and he did a concert. And he wanted some very special things. He wanted to have a special kind of chair and just a light, over his, like a little light you'd have in your living room over his shoulder, which I provided for him, no problem at all. It was not an unreasonable request. And he did too much talking. He would play a song, but then he would talk for 20 minutes in between songs, and it was like people were getting edgy about that. See, now he's fabulous entertainer and very good, but there has to be a balance between the banter and the shtick you have and the music.
The biggest criticism we ever had, which I think now was the biggest compliment, was that we were too professional. In other words, that bumbling thing comes out of the 1960s folk revival, where you had to be anti-Frank Sinatra, anti-Dean Martin, so you didn't come out and do stuff. You came out and you tuned your guitar for 5 minutes before you started to play. Now, I think that's changed, hasn't it? Because the most professional, I've come and seen every Lawrence Juba concert you've put on, and also Frank Vignola, who I think is just fabulous, not just as a guitarist, but what an entertaining evening.
And Frank is very tuned into the entertainment portion of it, and they do comedy bits. They're playing Swan Lake, and they're doing ballet across the stage, and it's, very entertaining. They have, I think Frank is probably one of the very, very best guitarists in the world, and Benny, his rhythm guitar player, is the same. They're both in the top 5 guitarists in the world, but they also understand that it's the entertainment that makes it happen for them. And speaking of tuning, I heard Tommy Emmanuel's been doing little at-home concerts from his room in L.A. recently. And the other day I was watching one of those, and he came out and he was talking about tuning, and he said, something that I do, I make sure that whenever I have a concert, before I walk on stage, I'm tuned up, I'm ready to go. I walk out on stage and I start entertaining people right now. And that's his part of his shtick, because he walks out and the energy in the room goes up immediately because he's out there playing something that gets you excited. And Frank and Vinny are, they're kind of the same way. They come out and there's no tuning. They're out there and they're doing a song. And then after they play maybe 1 or 2 or 3 songs, then they introduce themselves and they talk a little bit. But that's sort of, I think, the successful, shtick for these very successful guitarists who, you have to keep in mind, in my mind, is that, see, today we're lauding the singers, and the kids don't want to play guitar anymore. They want to sing. And so a guitarist, solo guitarist, has an extra burden because they've got to engage the audience and create emotion with their instrument, not with the lyrics. to the song. So that formula of coming out, you get people excited, you get them patting their foot, and then you can move on to something more, slower, more ballads or whatever. But usually they come out with a really, really great, exciting song.
Eddie, do you think that the skills you've been talking about with Frank and all the rest of them, that's because they've been doing it for a long time and they've learnt the art? Have you ever seen someone who's new, who's actually got that art from day one?
I don't know. I one of the things that I did as I moved through these 13 years of presenting concerts was I started out booking anybody that would walk in the door that had a guitar, and then I got to where I had a standard that you had to have you had to be touring nationally or internationally. I mean, I tried to get internationally touring people, Americans who go overseas or overseas people who would come here. So that was my I try to do that, not always, but touring internationally. You've got to have at least three CDs published, and you must be entertaining. I mean, that was sort of my criteria before I would book you, and the result of that was that my audiences knew when they came it was going to be good. And so I maintained my audience, and they would come and see anybody I put on the stage because they knew it was going to be good. There's a difference in my mind in the type of venue, because if you have a restaurant and you're hired as a guitarist to play background music where nobody listens to you, by the way, people come to restaurants to have conversations with each other. And then you have a bar, which, again, depends on the type of bar. You may have a band, but nobody's listening to them. And the open mic's the same thing. I have my niece, who is just a fabulous, fabulous singer, and she, and songwriter. She was having some anxiety about performing, and she's been coming to my song circles and getting better. And one night, myself and a couple of Savannah and Kathy took her up to an open mic just so she could play in front of people, knowing they weren't going to listen to her, because she was comfortable with that, okay, because it wasn't a threat to her. And then you have a listening room, which is a whole different environment, where, like Eddie's Attic started, that was the first listening room I was aware of, where there's signs saying, "Don't talk, we're here to listen to the music." The bar owner or the restaurant owner, they want to spend as little as they can spend and make as much as they can make. So they're going to pay you a pittance. And what I've suggested to people is, when you go to a restaurant to try to get a gig, understand that you're there to help the restaurant owner make money. So if you go in there with a plan to say, okay, here's how I'm going to help you make money. And if I were going to go do that, I would say, okay, I understand the restaurant business, and you want to turn tables. You want as many people to come through this restaurant in a night. And I understand that if they were listening to me and they like me, they're going to hang around. Well, we don't want that. We want them to spend 45 minutes at the table and go away. So I know that I'm going to come in, when you have your first sitting, I'm going to do a 45-minute set. And I'm going to quit until the tables turn. Then I'll come back and do another 45-minute set until the tables turn. Now, the last set, we want people to stay around because we want them to drink. So then I'll continue playing. Okay, so you've got to go into these restaurants with a plan to help the guy make money.
That's the first time I've heard that. That's brilliant.
I think it's very sound advice.
The other thing that I think is a great way to make better money in the music business is to do corporate stuff and to set yourself up to do a show for a corporate thing, so that if you work conventions, and I had attempted to put together a little group of people, I was just going to produce this. I wasn't going to play in it because I had some really good people, and my idea was to put together a group that they would have a 60s set. They would have a 70s set, a 90s set. They would have a bluegrass set, and I wanted to just have basically a back line of people to play the music, and then a core group of singers. And I was going to then market that to conventions so that you could go in with a 70s theme and do disco music or whatever, or do a 60s thing and do Peter, Paul and Mary and Bob Dylan and the folk stuff. And I think that's something that would be marketable. Now, the problem I ran into was there were just ego issues that I could not work out. And that's sort of an issue sometimes when you're trying to bring people together who are disparate people, because I wanted to hire people to play a role, and not necessarily to promote their ego, but to promote the show. And that takes a different level of professionalism.
So I think that's an important lesson for playing in a group for anybody, to be honest with you, Eddie. I mean, you do have to subjugate your own ego.
Right.
Yeah. And you see it, I think, talking about guitar players, you see it with guitar players, perhaps almost more than anybody else, that they kind of want to steal the show. It's all about their solo, etc., etc., etc. And as far as the audience are concerned, they don't give a damn, because if they don't play the guitar, they don't know the difference.
Yeah. I met a guy this was back in the 70s, and he was he was like a folk singer or whatever, and in the discussion, people were talking about what's the best, the most important lesson you learned, and this guy said, well, I met Ray Charles one time, and he told me it's what happens between the notes that's more important than the notes. And it's like it isn't about playing as many notes as you can play. It's to play the phrases and the notes so that they communicate. And a guitar player, I would rather hear a guitar player that makes me feel emotion than one that impresses me with his gymnastics, whatever. And I've never been attracted to the shredders. I just can't stand that stuff. I like very, melodic stuff, and even like people like who's the guy that I can't hit? He plays 12-string guitar. He's very popular. He's great player, and there's a few things I like from him, but others it's just boring because he's just playing jangly crap on the guitar, and it's not pleasing to me, and but it's true that the egos. If you're in a group, you need to be a team player and play for the team.
Take your niece. Where does she go to between where she's learning to play and when she decides she wants to go professional? Where is that middle rung of the ladder, which seems to have disappeared?
Well, I don't know. That's a problem with her. She hasn't. She could be a top country singer, okay, if she would put herself out there, because her songs are top quality. They bring tears to your eyes. I mean, she's got great songs. Her voice is just incredible, and when you hear her, you're just sucked into it. Her decision is more about, do I want to be a professional musician? Because she's got a family. She's got a couple of kids. She makes really good money in her profession. And so her decision is, do I want to put the time and effort, or is this a hobby for me, And so she's starting to go out and play and do the things that we all, I don't do much of this myself, but a lot of my friends, they go out and play gigs and, nursing homes and clubs and whatever, and ragamuffin type places, and that's where she'll be. But I think you have to decide, do you want to make that commitment to go to that next level? And then that's the question you're asking, where do you go to get there? And I think in today's world, you have amateurs, you have small touring bands that may make a little money, who they build their audience over through word of mouth, going from here to there. And then you have the American Idol people who go and they jump from 0 to 100 overnight because they go to these auditions and things. And I think there is a. Do you remember the duo called? My mind just went blank. There were two guys great songwriters. Bailey Jester.
I remember. Yes, I do. They were very good.
They were, and they came in the first night they came to the store. There were 6 or 8 people there. I mean, not as typical. Just nobody ever heard of them. Next time they came, there was a fairly decent crowd. There was a tornado warning, very severe tornado warning. We all rushed to my house and went to the basement, and then came back and played to the few people that remained. But the next time they came, we had an overflow crowd. There were 70 people trying to fit into this 50, seat room, and they were fabulous. I have their CD is one of my very, very favorite CDs still to this day. Great songwriting, great performance, but they were going up down the East Coast, becoming successful, they were doing well, but they were out traveling, and not making any real leaps into making money. And then the brother who played the bass got an offer to do a Beatles cover band shtick, and they offered him like $100,000 a year to go on the road, and so he left. And the other guy went to New York and became a cartoonist because he's very creative, but he's got out of quit doing it altogether. But man, those guys were tremendously good songwriters and performers, and had a great thing. It takes that you've got to be committed and persistent.
And for a lot of people, and you mentioned your niece Eddie, playing acoustic music, is there enough money in it to get a lifestyle that makes the effort that you've got to put in worthwhile compared to doing a regular job?
Well, I don't think there is, unless you've got to have a day job. I think there's until you become, until you get your own tour bus, you got to have a day job.
That's a big difference between the US and the UK, because you can reach a lot of places in the UK by leaving work early. You can get to a gig for 8 o'clock at night, and you can get home. Whereas in the US, it's too far away to the next major city.
Yeah, well, there's a couple just came to mind, the Acoustic Eidolon, and they are two of the loveliest people you will ever meet in your life. They are just the sweetest people, and it's a guitar-cello duo, and he plays what he calls a gitjo. It's a double-neck guitar with one neck tuned like a banjo. Both necks have 7 strings, but one of them is like a 7-string banjo tuning, and the other one is a regular 7-string guitar tuning. And when he plays, he will be playing both necks, and you're sitting there and you're trying to make your mind work around this, But they have been very, very successful, and they have a van, and they do a Southeast tour. They do a California tour. They go to Europe. They do a Germany tour. They go to some of the islands. Is there the Farjo Islands or something like that? I'm not sure what it has pronounced, but there's islands. I think it's northeast of Great Britain, out in the middle of the ocean, and they go there.
Faroe Islands, yeah.
Faroe Islands, yeah.
Yeah, and they do concerts there. They go back every year, and they do these. They play in some of the major cathedrals in Europe, and they have just built this business up over the years by, number one, being very good at what they do. And they'll sing a couple of songs during their show, but mostly it's just guitar and cello. And they've got a following everywhere. And, one of the things I wanted to mention is that, and I think they do this, and that is that it's essential that when you do a show that you put out, you give something away, and you make people put their name in the hat, you collect email addresses, and you maintain an active email list so that whenever you're going to perform, you send an email out. You've got to just consistently do that. Facebook won't do this, and a website won't do it. Email is the key to it, because it's like any sales effort, you have to make 3 contacts usually. That's what you're taught in sales. You got to do 3 contacts. And when I was in my concerts, the thing I learned was I had to do 3 emails. The first one says, Lawrence Tuber is coming in 90 days. Buy your tickets today. Then I would do another one 2 weeks later. Well, I would usually do a 6-week cycle. 6 weeks out, I would say, he's coming in 6 weeks. Buy your tickets. I would do one a month later saying, he's coming in a month. Buy your tickets. Then I would do one, 2 weeks out saying, buy your tickets. Then people would finally buy some tickets. And I would always add on, there would be an upcoming thing, but it's just, you've got to do emails and do a consistent thing with it. And, one of the things I was talking earlier about going into a restaurant and with a business plan of how you're going to help that guy make money. And what I've always suggested is you've got to collect email addresses of everybody in the room if you can. And then if I were to go into a restaurant and say, I want to come play in your restaurant, and here's how I'm going to help you make money, I'm going to start out by saying, I've got an email list of 3,000 names that are my fans. I've got a following, okay? And that's something meaningful. Now, if you've got 15 email, that's nothing, but you've got to have a critical mass of email addresses, because anytime you do an email, and I've been doing this for this kind of thing really for 40 years, and right now I work in for a company, and all we do is send out emails, and we have many other elements to it, but we send out millions of emails every day in the mortgage industry. And the thing that I've learned over the years is that if you'll get about a 3%, you may get an 18% open rate, but you'll get maybe a 3% buy-in rate. Okay, so if you send out 2,000 emails, you may sell, 30 or 40 tickets. I don't know what the numbers are, but let's say if you send out 1,000 emails, then you may sell 60 tickets. Okay, but you've got to send out those 1,000 emails, and so it's critical that as you develop your business, you've got to, every person you touch, you've got to get contact information and get back to them. And you have to collect it in terms, if you're traveling around Britain, you've got to have their zip code, so that when you're going into a certain town, you can target those people that may have seen you before, may like you. And that's part of your business plan in order to get the venues to hire you. You say, I've got a following. One of the biggest frustrations I used to have was when people would come in and they wanted to come to my place, and I would say, well, do you have a following? Well, that's not my job. It's your job to promote me. It's your job to bring in the people. And I'm saying, no, it's not. We have to have a partnership. And, you've got to bring me something. You've got to bring something to the table besides your so-called talent. You've got to bring people in because they want to come and see you. I'm trying to bring people in my guitar store so that I can sell guitars. I want people who will walk in the door and possibly buy something someday. And it isn't my job to provide the audience.
I know when I was running folk clubs here, it's actually booked artists who would put bums on seats.
Right. Yeah.
Now, and it's the support artists which are your future ones because they're learning and building their relationship so that when you book them, and they'll be cheap to book, they'll still get enough bums on the seats
Yeah.
to actually make profit. The big artists you probably don't always make money at. You don't want to lose money, but they would put the bums on the seats in the first place.
That support artist should be out there at a table with his CDs and getting email addresses and things as they walk out the door. And one of the things I learned was that as I was booking these internationally touring people who I was just amazed they would even give me the time of day. But I learned that, these guys, they're just like you and I. They're trying to put money on the table and buy food for their kids and stuff, and so they want to play every night somewhere, and especially if they're touring like in the southeast, they may come to Atlanta. They may try to book some small gigs around, but a $500 guarantee is significant, especially if you have 100 people in the audience who are guitar players. You sell your CDs. In a lot of cases, they would walk away with more money from CD sales than they would from ticket sales. And the thing that is also in today's world, and I'm just, this is my gut feeling, is that you don't sell CDs unless you're in the room with the guy right now, because if the guy says, I'll get it offline, they're not going to get it offline. They'll forget about you. But if they buy the CD right now, when you're there and you can sign it, they're going to buy it.